Before a new year can truly begin, something has to end. Not a habit, not a goal, not a routine, an identity. Most people enter a new year carrying an invisible weight, a version of themselves they've outgrown but never consciously released. They say they want change, but they keep protecting the identity that created the old life, the identity that learned to play it safe, the identity that learned to manage disappointment, the identity that learned to stay small, quiet, busy, or invisible. And because identity runs quietly, they don't notice it's still in control. They assume effort will fix it. They assume discipline will override it. They assume time will take care of it. It won't. Because identity doesn't fade with time. It only fades when it's acknowledged and released. Here's the truth that makes this uncomfortable but powerful. You cannot carry the same identity into 2026 and expect a different life to meet you there. The version of you that survived is not the version meant to expand. And yet, many people remain loyal to it, not because it's who they are, but because it's who they know. They mistake familiarity for safety. They mistake caution for wisdom. They mistake self-protection for self-respect. And so they step into a new year with an old internal contract still active. A contract that says, don't risk too much. Don't expect it to last. Don't disappoint anyone. Don't outgrow who you were. Those contracts once made sense. They helped you survive a chapter, but they do not belong in the next one. Because the future you want requires a different internal agreement. And until that agreement changes, the calendar doesn't matter. What comes next is understanding how these identities form and why releasing them feels so threatening, even when they're holding you back. The identity you're being asked to release is not obvious. It's not a label you proudly claim. It's not something you announce. It's the role you learn to play to stay safe, accepted, or needed. The responsible one, the strong one, the agreeable one, the one who holds it together, the one who doesn't ask for too much. These identities don't feel limiting. They feel virtuous. They're praised. They're rewarded. They're reinforced. And that's why they're hard to let go. Because letting go doesn't feel like growth. It feels like betrayal. Betrayal of expectations. Betrayal of who people think you are. Betrayal of the version of you that learned how to survive. But here's the truth most people never realize. The identity you outgrew is not wrong. It's outdated. It was formed in response to a chapter that no longer exists. And yet you keep obeying its rules. Rules like, be reliable even if it costs you. Don't inconvenience anyone. Don't take up too much space. Don't change too fast. These rules quietly shape your decisions. They decide what you say yes to, what you say no to, what you tolerate, what you postpone. And because they once protected you, your nervous system clings to them. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. This is why releasing an old identity feels unsettling. Your system interprets release as loss of safety. But safety isn't the same as alignment. Safety keeps you functioning. Alignment allows you to expand. And the discomfort you feel around letting go is not a warning sign. It's a threshold. It's the space between who you've been and who you're ready to become. What comes next is recognizing the specific identity that no longer fits and understanding why holding on to it will quietly shape your entire year if you don't consciously release it. There is a quiet realization that changes how you see yourself forever. The identity you're being asked to release is not a flaw. It's a strategy that once kept you safe, included, needed, or emotionally protected. And because it worked, your nervous system learned to trust it. But here's the shift most people never make. A strategy that once kept you safe can quietly keep you small. You may have learned to be the one who doesn't ask for help, the one who stays agreeable, the one who handles everything alone, the one who avoids conflict, the one who doesn't rock the boat. Those roles don't feel limiting because they're familiar. But familiarity is not truth, it's conditioning. And when conditioning runs unchecked, it turns into identity. You stop saying, I learned to be this way, and start saying, this is just who I am. That's the moment growth stalls. The deep shift happens when you separate who you are from who you learned to be. You begin to see that the identity you're clinging to is not your essence, it's your adaptation. And adaptations are meant to change when the environment changes. The danger is not holding on to the old identity. The danger is letting it define what you believe is possible now. Because the version of you that learned to survive doesn't know how to lead. It knows how to endure. It knows how to manage. It knows how to minimize risk. But 2026 doesn't require endurance. It requires presence, choice, expansion. And that requires releasing loyalty to the identity that kept you functioning at the cost of your growth. This doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means recognizing that gratitude doesn't require obedience. You can honor the past without letting it run the future. And the moment you see that, something inside you loosens, because you realize you are not betraying yourself by letting go. You are finally choosing yourself. What comes next is how to release an identity without fear, force, or chaos, in a way your subconscious can accept and follow into the next chapter. Releasing an identity doesn't happen through rejection. It happens through permission. Permission to respond differently in moments where the old identity would normally take control. Because identities aren't removed, they're outgrown. So instead of asking, how do I get rid of this version of me, you ask something far more grounding. What am I no longer willing to prove? That question changes everything. The old identity survives by constantly proving something, proving you're responsible, proving you're strong, proving you're capable, proving you're worthy of belonging, and proving is exhausting. The micro shift happens when you stop performing the role and start choosing alignment. That might look like saying no without explaining, resting without guilt, speaking honestly instead of politely, allowing support instead of carrying everything, choosing what's true over what's expected. Each of these moments signals to your subconscious, we don't need this role anymore. We are safe without it. This chapter requires something different, and your nervous system listens. It begins to release the grip it had on the old identity, not because it was wrong, but because it's no longer necessary. This is how real release happens, not in one dramatic decision, but through repeated moments where you stop reinforcing the role. And with each moment of non-reinforcement, the identity loses strength. Space opens. Space for a version of you that doesn't need to manage everything, doesn't need to be everything for everyone, doesn't need to stay small to stay safe. That space is not empty, it's fertile. And what grows there is the version of you that 2026 is actually asking for. What comes next is the closing realization, the understanding of what becomes possible once the old identity is fully released. There is a quiet moment when you realize the weight you've been carrying was never required. It was familiar, it was learned, it was once necessary, but it is no longer needed. The identity you're releasing doesn't disappear all at once. It loosens. It loosens each time you stop proving, each time you choose alignment over approval, each time you respond as who you are becoming instead of who you had to be. And in that loosening, something powerful happens. You feel lighter, not because life got easier, but because you stopped carrying a role that no longer fits. You stopped managing perception. You stopped rehearsing responses. You stopped negotiating with yourself about what you're allowed to want. You began to move from truth instead of obligation. And that is when the future changes. Because 2026 doesn't require a stronger version of the old you. It requires a freer one. One who no longer lives from survival contracts. One who no longer confuses loyalty with limitation. One who no longer mistakes endurance for identity. Releasing an old identity is not loss, it's recovery. Recovery of energy, recovery of clarity, recovery of direction. And once that identity is released, the year ahead doesn't feel intimidating. It feels open, because you are no longer asking, how do I keep everything together? You are asking, what am I ready to create now that I'm no longer carrying what held me back? That question doesn't rush you. It doesn't pressure you. It simply invites you forward. And from that place, 2026 doesn't need to be forced. It unfolds naturally as a reflection of who you finally allowed yourself to be.